Good evening. I'm Councillor Kelsey Lerney, Winchester City Council Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's Carbon Neutrality Open Forum. This meeting is being held virtually in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings, and attendees are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the Council and they should observe the normal rules of behaviour. First of all, can I ask everyone present in this virtual meeting that your microphones remain muted to reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. We will be asking you to access your mobile phones to access a Slido poll. However, please can you turn down the volume or switch to silent mode. Can I also advise that we will be recording this meeting and that this will be available on our website. So please keep your camera off if you do not wish to be seen. We have asked for questions to be submitted in advance and we will answer those first, but you can also submit those through the meeting via the chat function. If we don't have time to answer you tonight, we'll send an answer via email after the meeting. We often emphasise home heating and transport as areas where households can reduce their carbon footprint, but many of us don't realise that our food has a similar impact on the planet. It's an area we all need to think about, and it gives me great pleasure this evening to welcome Sam Watts, the chair of the Winchester Food Partnership, and Simon Rutledge, Group Sustainability and External Affairs Manager from BIFA, who are going to talk to us about how we can make a difference at home, both through what we choose to eat and how we dispose of it and the amount we dispose of. Prior to that, we do have our first Slido poll, if I can hand over to you, Anna. And the question we're asking you this evening is, what comes to mind when you think of locally sourced food? You can either join by through the QR code on your mobile phone or through a web browser. If you type in slido.com, and then it will come up with a box asking you to feed in the number that's right. So we have our word cloud starting to form. We have with wholesome. So somebody's obviously quite quick on the mark when it comes to Slido. We've still got a couple of people typing in, but the word cloud's building up nicely. Right, I think we'll bring that to a close. I think this shows how some of us feel about local food and the impact it has on our areas in terms of how we connect to our own food and how we support local growers and so on, which brings us very neatly to Sam Watts, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the chair of the Winchester Food Partnership, who's going to be talking to us about food and climate, how you can make a difference. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you, and hello everyone. So, as well as being the chair of the Winchester Food Partnership, I'm also the current chair of Incredible Edible Winchester, which many of you may have heard of more, but I am soon to be handing that over to my colleague Kitty. But if you've got any questions or would like to find out more about community growing, please drop me a note on the Incredible Edible email. If you're more like a business or an organisation that you want to get involved, please drop me a note on the Winchester Food Partnership email address. So why do I think food is important? So food has a huge impact on the overall climate. And if we look at the global situation, food production, if you look from farm to fork and even farm to waste bin, it is responsible for 26% of global emissions, which is CO2 equivalent. But food waste in itself is responsible for 6%. 70% of fresh water withdrawal is used for agriculture, and that's really important, taking into account the droughts that we and a lot of the world has been experiencing when it's not flooded. And 50% of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. So whether you're interested in biodiversity, the environment, transport, social justice, food plays its part. But when we talk about global food systems, people sort of think, well, that doesn't make any difference to me. So I want to bring you right down to Parish, Winchester Parish carbon footprint reports. Now, if anyone's involved in the WeCan projects, you may have seen the parish reports that were done for your specific parish. Now, this one's South Wonston, and this is looking at the emissions for people's households. And as you can see there, a quarter of your household's emissions is food. Half of it is meat and fish for those that eat meat or fish, and the other half is food and drink. So if we can make a difference with the food we eat, we can make a huge difference on the global our own environmental footprint. And it's something that we can do straight away. We can make small changes and they make a big difference. And it's something that doesn't actually need any capital outlay. So we can do it for free and actually hopefully save a bit of money. So when we look at food, and people often say to me, you know, why is the message less meat if we want to make a big difference? And should we buy local? Should we buy organic? You know, there's lots of questions. And there's two things. There's the thing that will make the biggest difference, and then there's the thing that is the easiest to do. So the thing that will make the biggest difference is reducing the amount of meat we eat, and meat we do eat local, UK reared, and this is why. If you look, there's lots of graphs that show you comparisons, but whether you look at the CO2 emissions per the kilogram of food or the 1,000 calories, meat and cheese and things like that is always at the top. But the one that scares me a little bit is chocolate and things like coffee, because they're also grown in areas where deforestation happens, and it has a big impact on land use and the environment locally. Graphs like this show the climate impact from land use, the actual farming of the animals, the feed it might have, processing, transport, retail and through to packaging. It doesn't show the waste element. So what I want people to really think about is, if you want to make the biggest difference, you need to change some of the things you eat. Now, this is the average footprint of standard dietary choices people make. That first donut graph I showed you showed that a quarter of our carbon footprint from a household is from food. And that shows to me that most people in Winchester are meat lovers, because it's around the 3.2 tons of CO2 per person per year. Now, if you can just reduce that meat and dairy content a little bit, you would drop it down to 2.5 tons. If you gave up red meat altogether, again, a further drop of down to 1.9. And if you were vegetarian or vegan, you'd make a bigger difference. But I'm not saying to have a sustainable diet, you have to go vegetarian or you have to go vegan. but we do, from a planetary point of view, and even a human health point of view, we do need to eat less red meat. For those that are interested, I'd highly recommend reading the Eat Lancet Commission on Food, Planetary and Health. And it took all the diets that are around the world and it wanted to look at how can we eat within the planetary boundaries. So how can we eat so it is sustainable, healthy for us and healthy for the planet? And it came up with this shocking summary that if we all stuck to this weekly allowance, it is a sustainable amount. But actually 100 grams of red meat, so a medium beef burger, 200 grams of poultry, so a large chicken breast, and 200 grams of fish, which would normally be a large fish supper, that is actually your weekly allowance. And I'd question anyone who's had a barbecue over the summer. Some of you might have eaten that in one go, and that is actually your weekly allowance. And the remainder of our dietary protein should be plant-based. We overestimate the amount of protein we need in our diets. The average woman only needs 45 grams per day and men 55 grams per day. And actually there is a lot of dietary protein in plant-based foods. So it is time that we just have a change and maybe just once a week cut out meat, twice a week, and see if we can make changes there. And then why should we eat and what do we mean by better meat? Sustainable Food Trust estimates that emissions from beef reared in the UK is actually 30 times less than that raised in places like America or even Australia, where it's intensively farmed. So meats that we do eat, where possible, should be UK reared, better for the environment, better for the planet, local, supporting local farmers. And also when we're talking about better meat, we need to look at sustainable fish stocks. But that is the item that we can do to make the biggest change. So what's the easiest? I mentioned all those figures. The scary one is that 30% of food processed is not eaten. And that's for a multiple number of reasons. Some of it spoils before it reaches the consumer. So there is waste at the farm gate and there is waste in shops. But of the 30% of food that's produced that isn't eaten, a staggering 70% of that figure is wasted in the household. So that's where my biggest challenge to everyone is. We need to reduce our own household food waste, and then we can go on to the larger argument of reducing it elsewhere. So if we look at food waste globally, as I said right at the beginning, global food waste equates to 6% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is 3 times that of aviation emissions. 20 to 30% of food produced is not eaten, and 70% of that is in the home. The average household bins 60 pounds of edible food, but that was actually those are the figures from 2020. So if you think about food inflation, that's probably closer to 60%, sort of 80 pounds. But again, saying that, you know, talking global or even UK figures sometimes misses the point. So if we look at Hampshire, the average person in Hampshire wastes, or the average household, sorry, is 3 kilograms a week. You multiply that up, and that is actually 130,000 tons of food wasted a year, which is the same as 2 Titanics. So actually, each one of us can make a difference. And there's 7 things that we can all do. A big one is understanding dates. 70% of food waste in Hampshire was thrown away because it passed its date, the use by dates. But often when you talk to people about dates, they misunderstand a sell by, use by and best before. So a sell by date is simply used by the shops to make sure that they're changing their stock. It's a logistical date. It doesn't mean that the food is unhealthy to eat or anything. A best before is literally a guide of its best quality eaten before that date. And actually, as long as the container's not broken and it's stored properly, you can eat things quite a long time after the best before dates. The only one we really need to be careful is use by date, because that can be a safety issue. It's often on meats and dairy products, and there is a risk to health if you eat it after that date. However, things don't go out of date at midnight, so there's a little bit of flex in that, maybe the day after. But don't forget, you can freeze or cook items up to the use by date to extend the life, and that is a great way of reducing our own food waste. Optimizing storage is another thing. So some things are better stored in ambient, so in cupboards. Some things are stored in the fridge, and obviously depending on your fridge temperatures, things last longer, or even in the freezer. But you know, we need to make sure when we chuck things in the freezer, we label them, and we rotate them, and things don't get stuck in the bottom of the freezer for ages. Portion control is a big thing. People often say, well, I cooked a little too much. And our challenge to you is to either measure. You don't have to do it every time, just do it for a week or so. Measure the amount of food that you're cooking, sort of have a look on the suggested suggestions and go from there. Or deliberately make twice as much food, batch cook, and have leftovers for another meal. Which leads me to planning. Planning, that depends on how you work. Some people write shopping lists, some people meal plan. For me, those don't really work. But what I do is I plan an eat the fridge day. So before I go shopping, sort of every 10 days or so, I eat everything in my fridge. And every 6 months, I go through my freezer, normally just before Christmas, and make sure that everything I've put in the freezer for later, I eat up. Complete eating is a phrase that I actually only learnt last year, and it's about eating the whole food. Lots of people automatically peel fruit and veg when actually you don't need to, and there's lots of nutrients and fibre either in the skin or just under the skin. So actually it's really good for our health if we eat the peelings. Things like broccoli stalks, people automatically throw them away when actually they taste just as nice as the broccoli florets. So you can either use them in soups or actually chop them up thinly and chuck them in a stir fry, or even grate them into soups, pizza bases, things like that. You can hide a lot of veg gratings in a lot of sauces. Another one is share any surplus, whether that's with your friends, your neighbours, colleagues, even community groups. If you have an allotment or maybe fruit tree at home, there's community pantries around locally, other cooking groups, or the food banks. Just give them a call and ask them if they can take any of your excess. If you don't want to do that, or you've got some smaller items, there are food sharing apps such as Olio, which is a bit like FreeCycle for food, and you can just put it on, say where you want people to collect it from. You can either leave it on your doorstep, and then again, someone else can take good use of your surplus food. The final one is composting and growing your own. Compost is a great way to dispose of any food waste rather than putting it in the bin. And there's lots of advice online if you don't want a traditional compost bin. There's wormeries, there's bokashi bins. There's lots of ways of composting food waste if you have somewhere for it to go. But obviously not everything's suitable if you don't have a garden, or maybe you're living in a flat. So reducing food waste in the first place is the way to go. And then growing your own food. 3 things I would suggest people grew: soft fruit and veg, herbs and salads, because they're the items that regularly go off and have a really high environmental footprint because of the water and the plastics they're often wrapped in. And then it's only then should we be looking for curbside collections, which our next speakers are going to talk about. So what can we all do as individuals? So as a household, I'm suggesting that you might want to complete your own food waste diary. And if you look at Incredible Edible Winchester, we've got one that you can download. And it just, having to write down everything you throw away in a week really brings light onto why you're wasting that food, and if there's anything specific that you're regularly wasting. If you follow us this week, You'll see all these hints and tips in a bit more detail where people can share ideas. There's the Hampshire Kitchen Heroes scheme where you can sign up and you can win awards and win prizes for great food savings, or follow Love Food Hate Waste. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, see if your parish council is taking part in the We Can activities, or start a group that actually is focusing on food waste. If you're a business or an organisation, you can join the Winchester Food Partnership and sign up to the Planet Pledge, and myself or my colleague Steve or one of the other team will happily get in contact and talk more about what we can do together as Winchester District to make everything a better place. I'd love to take questions later, but I think it's over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was very informative. We do have a couple of questions, but I would encourage people to keep typing questions in the chat and we will come back to them at the end. Many of you may be asking about the same kinds of things, but it gives me great pleasure to invite Simon Rutledge, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the Group Sustainability and External Affairs Manager at BIFA, who's going to talk to us about food waste, reducing climate emissions. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you very much for that. I had the joy of seeing Sam's presentation earlier, so I could make sure that I wasn't duplicating some of her excellent advice about reducing the amount of print, changing the types of diet that we have, all of which is really good advice, and that's certainly not what we're trying to compete with here. What we're talking about is what we can do at a sort of level up in the food chain, and absolutely not taking away from those local sort of solutions. My children love green carrots, Sam, which is the broccoli stalk, appropriately steamed and chopped. If you rebrand these things, and start them on it fairly early, they don't always notice the difference. So yeah. I have used my local community apple press when it comes to this time of year, just to get some feedstock for cider and use my grandmother's apples. So absolutely keep on doing those really local activities. That's not what we're competing with here. Okay, so what I'm going to talk a little bit about is food waste avoidance and reduction throughout the supply chain. And some of the little bits and pieces that BIFA have been doing, along with other waste management companies and resource management companies. So starting with this organisation that we trying to get. It was interesting to see that 30% of food isn't actually eating, and disappointing to see that 30% of food is not eaten. And equally disappointing that 70% of that is not eaten and wasted in the household. What we're talking about with this organisation that is part of the BIFA group of companies, Company Shop Group, is a solution for redistributing surplus food and products. It's utilising surplus products from a variety of different partners, including large retailers such as Morrison's, Tesco, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Ocado, many other retailers involved, and again a lot of manufacturing partners, and focusing specifically on the materials which are absolutely suitable for use, suitable for human consumption, that because of whatever reason within their manufacturing chains might not make it to the retail outlet. And that could be due to changes in ordering and British weather. It could be, we've worked with some suppliers. I remember a yogurt supplier that was producing waste when they were swapping over different types of flavours. So we came up with the idea, well, why don't you actually mix those different types of flavours instead of washing the machine down and wasting it all? Why don't we have banana chocolate flavoured yogurt, and Company Shop Group will label it up as such and make absolutely make sure the labeling is there and food safety compliant to ensure that can be sold on as perfectly good surplus food. So redistribution, avoiding waste. I think Sam mentioned that one of the issues around food waste is the embedded carbon within the actual food from its growing, be that from the agricultural and the water, from the transport of it, and I think it's probably the same WRAP report that you mentioned. I didn't notice that. Sorry about that. But yeah, it talked about 3.6 million tons of surplus food produced every year, of which 2 million tons needlessly wasted instead of being redistributed in the household. So Biffa were wanting to do more to avoid this and acquired the Company Shop Group back in February 2021. And last year we prevented 98 million surplus products from going to waste. And that equates to around about 35,000 tonnes, avoiding 34,500 tonnes of CO2 compared to landfill when you use the Scottish Zero Waste Scotland landfill figures for domestic waste. So I've got a little video which will hopefully set the scene about this. It's hopefully going to work, and it'll give you a little bit of background around the whole process.
We're here to stop surplus going to waste by turning problems into potential. We do this by redistributing surplus through our chain of discounted, members-only, company shop and community shop stores. Surplus is an inevitable part of the manufacturing, distribution and retail process, and we handle it all, from full sugar soft drinks with diet labels to mushroom soup made with too many mushrooms. Surplus products are either purchased by us or donated by our retail and manufacturing partners, and we can manage it in two ways. Through donation direct, where donations of products that are appropriate, both in terms of size and suitability, are distributed to our community shops throughout the UK. And through donation activation, where products which can't go direct are activated through company shop stores, who sell the products and credit the full value so that they can use it to secure a wide range of food and household products that their members need. Meaning members get access to the right products when they need them. Here's a couple of examples. Here's Dave from Dave's Ice Delights. Got 100 pallets of ice lollies he wishes to donate. He's really keen to get a social return from his donation, but the community shop is not on its own the best place to shift all 700,000 strawberry splits. The customers at Company Shop love a good strawberry split, so they'll help to snap them up while a more manageable amount can head off to the community shops. So with the value generated, Community Shop can now buy the products they need to stock for members and support the life-changing programs they run. Good job, Dave. Now it's Debbie's turn from Debbie's Deodorants. She has 12,000 crystal clear body spray cans that have somehow been mislabeled. Great news. Company Shop store members love to try new fragrances, and so we'll be queuing out the door for these. Debbie likes the idea of supporting Community Shop's social enterprise, but she could also really do with recouping some of the money tied up in the product. No problem, Debbie. You can choose whether you want a social or financial return, or a mix of both. Good job, Debbie. You've helped make Company Shop store members feel great, and have also got some of the money back. And you've also helped some of the most low-income communities across the UK feel good. Now it smells as sweet as that. What Dave and Debbie have shown, thanks Dave, thanks Debbie, is that retailers and manufacturers can get a return on their surplus, our members get great discounts on quality products, and the amount of food going to waste is hugely reduced. Plus, the people who need it most get the support they need too. So that's...
I'll stop it there. That's I did see that someone's asked a question in the chat about the local one. Unfortunately, we're not in every high street. 14 miles away, I did a Google search from Winchester. Is the local one, and we're always looking for different locations for community shop. So it works really well where there are partner suppliers that have surplus stock, and the logistics work really well along those lines, and so they tend to be hubbed and spoked around those sorts of outlets. So that's just one way we're working on, absolutely trying to drive value out of the surplus and make sure it does get consumed, both from a social enterprise point of view through the community shop. It works on a membership basis, and the membership is consists of essential workers, NHS essential workers, emergency workers, and supply chain workers. And the community shop are those which are receiving benefits, means tested benefits. But the community shop isn't just about the food; it's about education and opportunities as well. So the community hubs with training opportunities alongside them. So that's one of the ways we're looking to really drive the surplus stock redistribution higher up the food chain to attack some of that 30% that we were talking about. And I will go on to talk about the next step down in the waste hierarchy. Again, we're absolutely not suggesting that this is a solution for all food waste. This is only for that material which cannot be consumed by humans, and then in the food waste hierarchy by animals as the next step down for animal feed. Now, we fully appreciate that animal feed isn't the solution for everything because of disease control and animal and Plant Health Authority restrictions. So again, please do not feed catering waste to ruminant animals or anything like that. But once we've looked at that which is suitable for surplus for humans redistribution, and then for animals, we then look at what we can do with other waste which is no longer suitable. And the role of anaerobic digestion is one potential solution for that. Again, what we're doing here is we have a national offering for food waste as from industrial commercial operations, including kitchens, cafes, and similar. We're still trying to channel any surplus that might arise in discussions prior to this through the surplus redistribution. But where that's not possible, waste is treated to remove contaminants such as packaging. Knives, surprisingly, we extract knives and forks using overband magnets. The food waste is then liquefied and heat treated again. There's a sanitization requirement, and then the food waste is put into digestion tanks such as these in the picture, which are where the naturally occurring bacteria consume it, and they produce methane. Methane as a gas in the atmosphere is not good, but when you collect it, you can use it as a replacement for natural gas to generate electricity, or even if it's cleaned up to even power vehicles. But energy generation tends to be the favoured option because of the grid for distribution. And then from that, because you've sanitized it and because you've carefully selected the feedstocks, you can produce a liquid fertilizer which can be utilised to grow more crops in a fibre-rich soil enhancer, which again helps with soil degradation and improving soil structure. So again, that's just another solution to avoid these materials going into landfill and to reduce the carbon footprint of food waste when it can't be avoided. And just looking at us as a business, how we've been measuring our emissions now for the last couple of decades. We've managed to reduce our CO2 equivalent emissions by 70% since 2002. And we've committed to get to net zero by 2050 at the very latest. And I, as sustainability lead, would love it to be far in advance of that. And that has been, part of the step changes, and that has been making sure we're removing materials from landfill and pushing them further up the waste and food hierarchy. But going forward, we're going to get to the difficult bits. electrifying fleet, zero carbon transport, hydrogen. Still probably a couple of years off for a lot of the heavy haul vehicles, but we're talking very closely to suppliers on that sort of process. And again, I think, you know, our absolute key strategy is to change the way people think about waste. I'd love it if we could get away with removing waste as a title, but we did talk earlier about the fact that inevitably at some point further down the chain, after you've tried all the waste avoidance pieces, you are going to get to some materials which are just no longer suitable for anything else. And again, home composting, absolutely brilliant. And if you've got the space to do that, really support that. But if not, and it's food waste collections, then anaerobic digestion does help to recover some of the carbon emissions and reduce the carbon emissions from that. And key to BIFA is the sustainability goals of circular economy, tackling climate change, and caring for our people and supporting our communities. So all of that is driving the change in the business model from a waste disposal company to actually adopting and driving forwards business innovation higher up the hierarchy. And I'm going to leave it at that. I think I might have run over by 1.5 minutes. I've got my clock on. Apologies for that. I shall pass over I shall pass back, and yeah, happy to pick up any questions as we go on or later.
Thank you very much, Simon. That was really interesting. Actually, Sam didn't use up all of her time, so we're actually running well on target for this evening, which is great because it will give us more time for our questions. So we've had a couple of questions submitted to us already, so I will deal with those first. The first is from Glyn Normington, whose question is, food waste sent to landfill generates large quantities of the highly damaging greenhouse gas methane. Using anaerobic digesters, food waste can be converted into green energy, water, high-grade fertiliser, and raw materials for paper and textiles. Fertiliser produced in this way offsets the high carbon cost associated with commercial fertiliser production. Given these facts, why has food waste collection not been prioritised in Winchester? And the second question, which kind of ties in with the first, so I'll take them together, is from Laura Griffiths, who had two questions. Firstly, are there any plans for household food recycling? And secondly, are there any plans for household plastic food packaging recycling? We've already started some of the discussion about anaerobic digesters in Simon's presentation. I will say that I actually use Digestate and the fertiliser that comes out of an anaerobic digester at my allotment. Our allotments have an arrangement where it gets delivered in bulk, so we can all share in those deliveries, and that is actually an excellent soil improver. And I've had an enormous potato crop this year, so the fertiliser obviously works as well. The one thing to say is that, in fact, in Hampshire, food waste does not go to landfill if it's put in your black bin. It actually goes to an energy recovery facility where it is used to generate power. Now, that's not as efficient as it would be going into an anaerobic digester, which takes the food and deals with it separately. But there are issues if we need to transport food waste over long distances around the carbon footprint of the transport we're using for that. And there are, you know, some other factors to think about. We are prioritising food waste collection in Winchester, and at the moment we're currently working on the business case for a full rollout of food waste across the Winchester district. Initially we were looking at a pilot scheme, but it's become clear that what we need to do is look at if we can roll that out quicker and in advance of the government's targets for introducing food waste collection across the whole country. That will be very much reliant, though, on resources being available. Rushmore recently introduced food waste collection, but they did reduce their other waste collections to help pay for that. And it's important we recognise that there are significant costs involved with moving forward on that at a time when it's very difficult, it's a very difficult time financially for local government generally. So yes, it is a priority, but we will have to look at the feasibility of introducing it sooner rather than later. The second question was, are there any plans for household plastic food packaging recycling? And the answer, again, I'm pleased to say, is yes to that one. Currently, Hampshire County Council and Project Integra are working on plans for a new what's called a MRF, effectively a materials recycling facility at Eastleigh. The existing facilities we use aren't capable of dealing with food waste, food packaging, but the new MRF will be able to deal with those. So as soon as that MRF is up and running, we should have the capability to be able to put that packaging into the recycling, along with the other plastics that we already collect. I do have the manager responsible for that available on the call. Campbell, did you have anything to add to that? Any details about the plans for the MRF moving forward?
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Yeah, as you said, Hampshire are currently they have planning permission in at the moment in Eastleigh to build a large single material recycling facility, which would take a wider range, well, all the pots, tubs, trays, and cartons that are currently in the system, and that's not something which our current facilities allow, and they were designed in the early 90s. But this would allow a much wider range of materials to be collected, and that will make a much simpler message to residents to recycle what they do, because lots of people think they can where they can't at the moment in Hampshire. And that's very much in line with some government guidance and instruction which is coming out, which is going to make that a requirement across the whole country, really. And that's the same with food waste. So food waste collections will become mandatory is their latest thinking. And so what we're looking to do is move that forward by 2025. But as Councillor Lerney said, really focus on a priority on food waste, and get that out as soon as we can.
Right. Thank you very much, Campbell. Okay, I'll move on to the questions that we have in the chat. The first comes from David Ingram. Do pigs really not produce any methane? It's not quite no methane. So I'm sure Sam can explain to us the difference between ruminant and non-ruminant digestion.
Thanks. No, I can't. That graph, that graph actually came from a website called Our World in Data, which is supplied by Oxford University. So I have to, unfortunately, take their advice as given. But in terms of pigs and poultry, the big difference not only is in the methane, is in the land use change and the farming. So it's not just whether they produced methane, which I can't argue against. I don't think they do because of how they digest the food. But the big difference is because of how they're reared. Yeah, I mean, one of the fundamental differences is that cows and sheep are ruminants who digest grass and do emit very large amounts of methane gas, whereas pigs have similar digestions to people. So, and we know that that's relatively small amounts, or for most of us anyway. The second question we've got is from Chris Gilbert Wood, which again is for Sam, which is what is your source for the 70% figure for food waste in Hampshire being through date expired food? Yeah, so it's that figure came from Hampshire Smart Living last year, who are the Hampshire Waste Prevention team, and they published that figure as part of the Food Waste Action Week in beginning of March this year. And it's date expired and also things that have gone mouldy in our fridges.
Right, thank you. So there was a question around the community shop, which, as Simon said, is one in Southampton. A question from our own Anna Wise. Do we know where the nearest anaerobic digester to Winchester district is? I presume this is one for Simon in terms of large scale digestion.
I do apologise, I don't. I should really do. Yeah, it's not one of ours, but I will find out for you and supply that information. There is a directory in on the ADPA website which lists all of the that's the Anaerobic Digestion Association, which lists all of the sort of local authority and commercial AD plants, which I did try and open, but I couldn't find it on their website quickly. So I'll supply that information, Councillor Lynn.
Yes, thank you. Campbell, can you assist with this?
Yeah, I'm no expert at this, but you mentioned Rushmore earlier, and they take their food waste to an anaerobic digester, which is in Herriard, which is just to the north of Winchester, so just outside the district. But I don't know where all the ones are around us, but there are commercial anaerobic digestion facilities around, relatively close to us.
Yeah, certainly. What we get for our allotments comes from close to Andover, as I understand it, so not very far away. So they are around. Right. Yeah. Next question is, I think I need to do a course on composting. Mine ends up too dry. So Sam, have you got some home composting tips to share with us?
Yeah, so there's a few easy tricks. If your compost is too dry, it could be that you need to just add a little more wet items, so grass cuttings or things like that. Or if it was in the summer, it just would have got dehydrated. So give it a bit of a water, turn it, get it aerated, because you also don't want it to go sloppy and smelly. But yeah, just water it every so often. Maybe the water once when you've boiled your vegetables, so we're not using drinking water, but just give it a water every so often, and just make sure you've got that mix of fruit and veg inedible stuff rather than peelings, and just get the balance right. Make sure there's enough brown items, so cardboard and twigs, and also the more green items are your grass cuttings and your vegetables. It should be about 50-50, but the occasional watering is sometimes required.
Yeah, shredded paper is a great addition to the compost heap, and it's something that we can't actually put in the recycling bin because of the way the recycling works. So if you've got any paper shreddings, you know, those are great on the compost, and they do actually help retain the water. Yeah, again, I have some massive compost heaps, so I've had lots of different experiences with experimenting with my compost. Right, Simon, I think you've got a suggestion.
I was just going to add to that from a commercial composting operation, and I live fairly close to one, and I work out of it frequently. My wife's school have delivery of compost for growing trials and for their beds, but composting is absolutely an art. It is not a science. Getting that mixture of, and I've had this argument with engineers and biologists.
Oh, you're muted, Simon.
I was getting excited. I hit the key. Yeah, composting is a bit of a passion, but getting that right is a real art. And yeah, we reutilize water off the roofs. We have to treat it to prevent any cross contamination from bird droppings that might be on the roof. But yeah, that's reutilized in most commercial operations to make sure that the moisture content is right, and then the temperatures are monitored constantly to stop them going too hot as well.
Right, thank you for that, Simon. I think it's more of a comment than a question from Sue Cook. Am I right in saying that currently Tesco's at Winall deals with crunchy plastic? It's constantly full. Yeah, I think Tesco's do take food packaging, but I'm not sure what they actually do with it. I don't know if anybody has any contribution they can make about what happens to Tesco's plastic. No, I'm afraid that's a subject that we don't know very much about, so we'll have to move on. There's a suggestion from Zadia Green that perhaps we could set up a lunchtime bite-sized session for me and other staff. Are you up for that, Sam? Right, so that's a yes on that one. So we'll see what we can do to enable that.
I mean, if people are generally interested in home composting, we've got 3 examples down at the community allotments off Worthy Lane. So we've got the standard Dalek composter, we've got a wormery and a hot compost bin. So people are more than welcome to get in touch, and they can go and visit it and speak to the team down there, because any problem anyone's got, we've also seen it. As Simon says, it is an art, but yeah, a few tips to get things sorted.
Right, thank you. So there's a question from Councillor Malcolm Wallace. My understanding is that there is still a problem with bioplastics in that it can't go into the green recycling or into plastics recycling. Is that correct? I think Simon may be the person who knows about this. Yeah, again, bioplastics are there are a variety of classifications of plastics, but many bioplastics are almost identical to fossil fuel derived plastics. The base polymer has just been derived from a biogenic source. So yeah, it breaks down in slightly different ways and lasts. Biodegradable plastics again were an interesting inception. I can recall leaving a bag full of records, vinyl records, in my father's attic in an old, I think it was the Co-op that first introduced some of these. And when I went back to get it, because of the heat and the moisture in there, the whole thing had just disintegrated into little flakes, which was of no use. And we did once have a supermarket, I'm not going to name them, or a retailer of compost that wanted some of our compost in biodegradable bags. At which point we pointed out that the activity within the actual material itself would degrade the bag before they got it to the shop, and they certainly wouldn't be able to sell it, and it would be no longer fit for purpose. So yeah, it's we have a team of polymer experts looking at these, but getting the wrong plastic in the wrong stream can really impact on existing recycling systems. So putting bioplastics in with PET, the clear drinks bottles and those sorts of things can really have an impact on that. And most of the sorting facilities have been designed further along the line. Where you were talking about an advanced MRF, there we have some advanced perfs that will actually pull that out, just because it's not suitable for the traditional recycling process. There are still advances in chemical recycling process, which we're working with a number of universities on to try and look at whether or not you can break those down on a commercial scale into the feedstocks. So yeah. Yeah, I know this has been an issue, particularly around coffee cup recycling, where we've moved from a fairly standard coffee cup with the plastic inside to cups which are made in all kinds of different ways and are very difficult to get into the waste stream. So have you got some experience of that, Simon? Yes, again, trying to, I think there was a question about compostable packaging as well on the thing later on. I think I saw one pop up.
and we have run trials with a variety of different organisations on composting compostable packaging, which is great if you have a very clean, pure source of it. The problem is, as you said, Councillor Lean, trying to explain to the members of the public what the different types are based on colour or feel or texture or label is really problematic. So one particular organisation that moved to a vegetable plant-based sort of packaging, they tried it, but then when members of the public were bringing their own plastics and seeing what looked like a bin for plastics, they were putting it all in the same bin. And the issue with commercial composting is you work on a batch, and you might have several hundreds of tons of the product at the end. If you've contaminated that batch with materials which might have been genuinely thought to be compostable materials, you've lost the ability to utilize all of that material. So yeah, there's a little bit of work to be done yet, I think, to standardize those things or provide dedicated facilities that only process that sort of composting compostable packaging.
Right, thank you very much, Simon. We've got a comment in the chat about hard plastic can also be taken to Sainsbury's at Badger Farm, if anybody's interested in that. And we have a question from Jonathan Williams. I know recently WCC have introduced Tetra Pak recycling centres across the district. Are there possibilities to expand the number of centres if a parish council is interested in hosting a site? I will bring Campbell back in to answer that one. There are a number of Tetra Pak recycling facilities in the district, but I don't know about how easy it is to expand further. Campbell?
Yeah, there are 5 at the moment in Winchester. So there's one in Worthy Lane, got Alresford, South Wonston, Denmead and Colden Common, and they were done with the parish councils. So if there are other parish councils, they can get in contact with me and I can see what we can do. They do need to be close to other recycling sites such as Bring sites, because it reduces the contamination and makes it worthwhile, because otherwise bottles and cans end up going in there as well. But if there is someone who has or knows a parish council who'd be interested in that, let me know. It's not that expensive because the lorry is coming down anyway to empty the other 5, so it's not a huge amount of money, and they're proving quite successful.
That's really good news. Thank you for that. Yeah, so Sam mentions that if anyone would like advice on composting, the Smart Living Hampshire team have lots of advice, or you can visit the IEW community allotments to see the composters, wormery and hot bin in action. So I'll just repeat what you've already said, Sam, for information. A question for Biffa. What can be done about compostable packaging? Can it be disposed of in a sustainable way, or does it need to be incinerated?
Hopefully I've answered that partially. I didn't follow on with the incineration bit. I think if you have extremely clean sources, so for instance, there are a number of large festivals where they dictate to those particular to the particular vendors on site that you will only use this particular type. Then you will collect it separately from everything else. Then if you can get really clean feedstocks, then yes, you absolutely can put them through a composting facility. It does take slightly longer, and it needs shredding, pre-shredding, to get it to the required size, because otherwise in a commercial operation the throughput is a lot quicker. You can get the vegetable matter and the green matter to degrade a lot quicker than the compostable packaging. So yes, there are small issues there. the real issue, as I say, is contamination. You only need a small amount of contamination to lose an entire batch. So there is an absolute risk there that if there's any risk of contamination, most operators are not going to want that, because you've ruined the good work that everyone's done with the rest of the material. So that's why I think small dedicated composting facilities that deal only with that, and the other small amounts of green waste, they're probably a slightly better solution than larger, risking large batches of composting being impacted. Will they go to incineration? Absolutely. You know, if they will, and if they're from plant-based, obviously the carbon that has gone into manufacturing that is fairly short rotation. It's not fossil fuel based, so it has a lower impact, you know, overall on the on climate change. In that you know, that plant took up that carbon and absorbed that carbon within the previous 1 or 2 growing cycles, and they've manufactured it out of that. So unless it's wood based, in which case it takes a lot longer for a tree to grow. I fully appreciate that, but for some vegetation based packaging items, incineration is not a massive impact from a carbon emissions point of view. However, I would always suggest reusing and using reusable items. You know, my old cafe that wanted to move to plant-based compostable items reinstalled their crocs, and absolutely fine for people. Reusing is clearly far better than single use.
Right, thank you. And that brings us quite neatly on to the next question, which is from Joe Crocker. It's good to know people are thinking about recycling, but better to have less waste in the first place. Is Winchester City Council or the Winchester Food Partnership looking into supporting local produce, e.g. the farmers market, community shops from allotment surplus, etc.? I'll ask Sam to respond to that first.
You're on mute, Sam.
Thank you. I pressed twice. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the question. The difficulty is the scale. If we're talking about allotment surpluses, there tends not to be enough for a retail model, and that's where we're suggesting people take it to community food projects. But my colleague Steve is looking at a larger business to business model where food is sort of bought by a consortium and shared out to improve a better local economy, but we're really in the early stages. So it really is at the moment, because this is household food waste, it really is about, you know, sharing with your local community, whether that be your friends, family, neighbours, store it, turn it into chutney, that type of thing at the moment. Doing a retail option can be really difficult, and there's food safety issues, all sorts of problems with allotment surpluses. But on the Winchester Food Partnership, there is a list of community projects that will take homegrown surplus.
Yep, thank you. In terms of the farmers market, we're in regular contact with the Winchester Farmers Market, and certainly seek to both support it and try and encourage its growth, because it is one of the ways in which we can encourage local produce and fewer food miles. With regard to food miles, one of the issues around small amounts of produce is that sometimes you can end up adding more food miles than you're really saving if you're driving around with these things. So I think keeping it local, really micro local ideally, is ideal. Certainly I hand plenty of my extra produce out to my neighbours, and there's also allotment swaps as well, is another good thing to do. So certainly think about all of those kind of things. So Jonathan Williams has responded to the answer to say he'll be contacting us on behalf of Bishops Waltham, so we'll definitely have a look at that. And another question from Councillor Cook. Is there a breakdown on how popular each Tetra Pak site is with tonnage? Campbell, I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yes, I've got the figures somewhere. It's not a competition, and so I can't tell you, and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but we do have it broken down, because it all contributes towards our overall recycling tonnage, which has been going up recently because of the efforts people are doing.
Yeah, I think we're seeing really good figures coming through on our recycling, which I think is a credit to local people, and the thought they put into these kind of things. So it is good to know. I think we have actually come to the end of questions. So unless anybody wants to type something in very quickly, I think we'll move on to the final part of the meeting. So it's been really great to have so many of you attending this evening. We've heard some really interesting presentations from both Sam and Simon, coming at these things from different directions. And I'm sure it's given us all food for thought, so to speak, which does bring us on to the final Slido of the evening. Anna, if you can get it up on screen.
Will do, bear with.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on 2 seconds, sorry.
Yep.
There we go, right.
Yeah.
Just while I'm clicking around to try and get the right bit of my screen to come up, I was just going to suggest that we do a short promotion on some of the grants that we've got available. So we've got a couple of green grants that we can give out, and I'll post them in the chat, details in just a minute of how you can access those grants. Right, let me have another go at doing this. Hopefully you can see now. The question is, what can we each do differently as a result of tonight's presentation? There's another QR code to scan in, and again, if you go to slido.com, there's a code.
Yeah, that's it. So the code is 1500952. We'll do a bit of, while people are doing that, we'll do a bit of promotion work. Joe Crocker has mentioned that there are more than 50 organisations are putting on events for this Green Week, and has put the WINAC link to events in the chat. We've also got a link from Sam for Share Our Surplus, the Winchester Food Partnership. And Lavana Hayes has posted a useful website around where things can be recycled. And Dave Ingram, a biogas map for anybody who's interested. So please have a look at the chat to see if there's anything you'd be interested in clicking through to. Yeah, so we've had quite a few responses. I think my favourite tip for this evening was definitely around the green carrots. So thank you very much for that one, Simon. Yep, so we've had some great responses to that question around eating less beef, with a very sad face attached to that one, planning meals better, buying what we need, and so on. So this has been a really good session. I'd like to once again thank our presenters, Sam Watts and Simon Rutledge, for their input this evening. And we finished slightly early, but that'll let you all go off and eat your dinners, hopefully. So thank you very much, everybody. This will be posted on the council's website for anybody who wants to revisit those presentations and the Q&A, but I'll leave you all to have a very good evening. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thanks all.